When did you realize your parents were bad at parenting? So I was scrolling through old photos from my teenage years and found one that brought back this whole memory I had literally blocked out from when I was 16. It was from this family road trip to Arizona where my parents, Nancy and Arthur, decided we were going to do the character building thing and camp in the desert for a week. I'm sitting there in this faded photo looking miserable with this forced smile, and it all came flooding back. The trip started normal enough. We packed up our minivan with all this camping gear that my dad had barely used since like the 90s. My mom, Nancy, was obsessed with family bonding and kept making us play these stupid car games while my dad drove. I was being typical moody teen vibes, but whatever. We get to this campsite and it's literally the middle of nowhere. No cell service. This was 2012, so not as big a deal as now, but still sucked. No bathrooms except this gross pit toilet thing. No other people for miles. Just us and the desert and my parents acting like this was some amazing adventure. The first night was fine, I guess. My dad built a fire, and my mom made these hot dogs that were burnt on the outside and cold on the inside Lowell. They were telling these stories about their college days that I had heard like 500 times before. I just wanted to go to sleep in our tent. So here's where it gets weird. On day 2, my parents woke me up at like 5 a.m. and said we were going hiking before it got too hot. I was tired AF, but whatever. We start hiking into this canyon area, and after like an hour, my dad says, okay, this is far enough. And then they both sit down on this rock. My mom pulls out this little notebook, and my dad gets this serious look on his face. They tell me to sit down across from them. I'm getting kind of freaked out NGL. Then my mom says, we need to talk about your attitude. You've been making this trip difficult for everyone. I was so confused. Like I had barely said anything the whole time. I had just been quiet and going along with their weird desert camping fantasy. They start listing all these things I've done wrong, like not being enthusiastic enough about the trip, rolling my eyes when my dad told his stories, not helping enough with setting up camp. Then my dad says, we brought you out here specifically to address this. And that's when I realized they had planned this whole trip as like an intervention for a teenager being a normal teenager. My mom pulls out this list, an actual written list of my behavioral issues that they had been documenting for months. Things like spends too much time in room and doesn't contribute to dinner conversation and seems uninterested in family activities. And you know what they did? They marked emotional manipulation on their little list. They had boxes to check next to each behavior, and they were literally taking notes on my reaction. My dad then tells me we're not going back to camp until we work through the issues, and that they've allocated this entire day to family therapy in the canyon. No water except what was in their backpack. No food except some gross granola bars. Middle of the desert. I tried to just agree with everything to make it stop, but they kept saying I wasn't being authentic in my responses. We sat in that canyon for 7 hours. I got sunburnt, I was dehydrated, I was hungry and exhausted, but they wouldn't stop until they felt I had properly addressed every single item on their list. When we finally got back to camp, I was literally swaying on my feet. My mom took a picture, the picture I found today, and told me to smile because we made real progress. They acted like what had just happened was totally normal and healthy. That night, after they went to sleep, I checked their backpack and found a whole folder labeled Nancy and Arthur's Parenting Strategy, with printed articles about wilderness therapy and intervention techniques. But it was all this amateur psychology bees they found online. There was a checklist titled Contingency Plans that included stuff like if subject becomes resistant, extend session, and if subject attempts to leave, remind her that she doesn't know the way back. They had actually planned for the possibility I might try to escape their weird desert therapy session. I realized in that moment that my parents weren't just strict or weird, they were actually dangerous. They had dragged their child to the desert to perform some amateur psychological experiment with no training, no safety measures, and no consideration for my well-being. The moment we got home and had Wi-Fi again, I say everything to my Aunt Georgia, who lived in another state. She was horrified. Within 2 weeks, she had flown in and confronted my parents. Turns out they had been deep into some weird parenting forum online where people shared these techniques for dealing with problem teenagers.